So as I've been developing my game, I've realized that about a third of the things I work on get either heavily changed or completely scrapped. Now I'm sure that's partly because this is the first game I've made, but it also just seems to be part of the process. I've always liked getting inside other people's heads to see what decisions they make and why they make them, so I thought it might be interesting to talk about a few of the changes I've made to Kato over time. Let's start with the biggest one. So Kato started out as a game focused primarily on testing your reaction time and dexterity. Weird obstacles would be steadily thrown at you, and you had two katanas that needed to be in the right position to chop through these obstacles once they reached you. After getting a basic prototype down, I realized that since the obstacles were being spawned at a steady rhythm, it would be possible to sync the gameplay up with the background music and play a random music note each time an obstacle was chopped. Thought that idea was cool for a few months before realizing it didn't feel as satisfying as I expected. You didn't have any control over when the obstacle was chopped, so it felt more like the chopping happened to line up with the music instead of feeling like you were actually making music. I realized the gameplay would be more fun, and there would be more options for new obstacle types if I sucked it up and transformed Kato into a rhythm game. I'd have to alter all the logic for the obstacles and katanas, commit to a lot of work on the music itself and getting the timing of everything right, but ultimately decided it would be better than knowing I was making a subpar game. And that became a common theme where I couldn't find a reason not to implement a big change or addition, so I ended up doing it. Now let's get into more detail and look at an obstacle that was a catalyst for making Kato into a rhythm game. While I was in that awkward period where I thought dynamic music was cool but hadn't made Kato a rhythm game yet, I came up with the stack bamboo. Pretty simple idea, it was just a stack of bamboo that would play a different note as each bamboo in the stack was chopped. I didn't take into account how weird it would look and how boring it would be to chop. All you had to do was hold the chop button down as all the bamboo passed you, which was exhilarating. Just in an effort to improve how it looked, I tried putting each bamboo in the stack into a different orientation. With that new arrangement, it wouldn't make sense to hold down one button to chop through it, so once it hit the front of the screen, it would pause and wait for you to chop through each individual bamboo. It looked better, had more complex controls, and I could still do the thing where a different note was played as each bamboo was chopped. This new pause bamboo, as I called it, along with the wood obstacle, made me realize how Kato was basically asking to become a rhythm game. Both of those obstacles would pause in front of the screen until you hit the right button combinations to chop through them. I realized that the dynamic control that existed there didn't exist in other obstacles, which made those obstacles less fun to chop through. Dynamic control leads to dynamic music melody, which is the gateway drug to a full-blown rhythm game. Speaking of the wood obstacle's dynamic controls, the wood obstacle used to be chopped in a really weird way. You would hit it directly once, and then move your katana in the opposite direction twice to chop through it. I originally thought all my obstacles would just require you to hit different key combinations compared to now, where each obstacle is sort of meant to test a different mental or physical ability. Basically, I realized this weird key combination didn't make any intuitive sense for chopping through wood. I spent about a month trying to come up with an obstacle that would make more sense for that key combination. I specifically remember drawing weird shapes in the middle of class one day to try and force my brain to come up with something new, until eventually I came up with the bar bamboo. It had the same controls, you hit it directly once and then move your katana to the side twice, only now it actually made sense. That's what made me realize it was better to come up with a mechanic first and then make an obstacle that implements it, rather than the other way around. It felt really cool when I finally came up with that, which is why this next one's gonna hurt. The bar bamboo and pause bamboo ended up with basically the same mechanic. Stop its movement by hitting it once, and then hit a predetermined button combination to chop through the rest of it. This meant that making a level that, for example, randomly spawned bar bamboo and wood would be no more interesting than a previous level that randomly spawned pause bamboo and wood. So I spent even more time thinking about this dang obstacle, trying to figure out how to make it unique. I eventually did come up with a really cool idea. I could put obstacles other than regular bamboo on the bar to spice things up, before immediately realizing I could do the same exact thing with pause bamboo. So ultimately, I implemented that into the pause bamboo and scrapped the bar bamboo entirely. I kept trying to come up with obstacles that would involve interaction between the left and right hands at the same time, because it just seemed like an obvious way to spice things up. And sure, it's interesting enough to be in the game, but I didn't need it showing up in 4 different obstacles. The problem was it had a huge downside. If the left and right hand are working together and the obstacle takes up both sides of the screen, then there's no way to combine it with different obstacles, so things would get stale pretty fast. The alternating bamboo was the worst manifestation of this. It would start on one side, you'd hit it, it'd flip to a random orientation on the other side, hit it again, random orientation on the original side, then a final hit to chop through it. It took 2 waves to chop through, took up both sides of the screen, you only ever used one hand at a time, and it basically just tested reaction time, which my dynamite obstacle already did. It did have slightly cool animations though. The time flip bamboo just had the generic problem where it couldn't be paired with other obstacles. You would hit it once on the beat, it would flip to the other side of the screen with the same orientation, and then you'd have to hit it again on the half beat. It actually felt kinda cool, like throwing a ball between your left and right hand, but not being able to combine it with other obstacles was way too limiting. That was when I really became aware of that problem, which led to me changing my long bamboo obstacle too. The long bamboo would stop in front of the player, then they had to mash all their buttons as much as possible to rack up points. I liked this idea, but there was simply no reason it had to take up both sides of the screen. So after a few months of denial, I said goodbye to all the modeling, texturing, and katana animating I did, and replaced it with something that only used one side of the screen. The only thing that ended up keeping this left side right side interaction was the control flip bamboo. It spawns on one side of the screen, but you have to chop it as if it were mirrored onto the other side. It manages to get some crossplay between both sides of the screen while not taking up both hands at once, so it can actually be combined with different obstacles. Best of both worlds. I was extremely proud of my rotate bamboo. It was the first time I ever used a coroutine to transition from one transform to another. Turns out it sucked because it wasn't as unique as it seemed. You might have to bear with me a bit for this one, but it was basically the same as my control flip bamboo. The whole idea of the control flip bamboo is that it shows up on the wrong side of the screen and you have to mirror it to the correct side in your head. The mirroring takes a lot of brain power at first, but eventually your brain just maps a vertical control flip bamboo on the right side with a left vertical chop button on your keyboard, and so on. The rotate bamboo did the same thing. You start out needing to interpret the arrow and follow its direction, but eventually your brain just maps a down pointing arrow with a diagonal chop button, and so on. It took me a while to notice this brain mapping phenomenon, but ultimately it made me realize the rotating bamboo was just a more boring version of the control flip, so I canned it. This last one's more of a quick PSA, and I might not even be right about it. I had the idea to use Unity's video player to play tutorial videos at the beginning of levels. I thought it would save FPS, but an HD video would actually cause a 1-second lag spike whenever it started or stopped playing. And yes, I even tried to preload the video. On top of that, it would drop the general frame rate by about 200 FPS. It ended up being more efficient to just simulate the tutorials in real time. So, at least from my experience, I would never plan on using Unity's video player to save FPS on rendering something unless it's something like extremely graphics heavy. And those were all the changes I felt were most worth talking about. If you want more updates about the game, be sure to follow me on Twitter, or check out my devlog, or you can just wishlist the game on Steam to know when it comes out. Anyways, That's all I have for now. Thank you for watching.